From whence? Linguistics. How did we get here? How did the field evolve into what it is today? Well, first and foremost, we have to answer the question, what is linguistics? Linguistics is the scientific study of language, and modern descriptive linguistics is just that. It aims to describe language in all of its facets, what languages are, how they work, how people use them, etc. It does not aim to prescribe how people should use them or what languages should be. In linguistics, we often refer to these kinds of people as prescriptivists. You may know them as grammar Nazis. Linguistics really isn't interested in that. We're just worried about what people do, how people use language, and how they develop. Now, in order to further understand a field which purports itself to be the scientific study of language, we must also ask, what is language? We might say that a language is a complex adaptive system of signs conventionalized by a population of speakers and used to convey information. Let's break this down a bit. Complex. Languages are quite intricate entities, and with many unique parts, some of which are shared between languages or among languages, and others which are not. Adaptive. Languages can and do change. Not only that, that change is pervasive and systematic, such that it can sometimes be predicted. One thing that you can never do is stop language change. And finally, signs. But exactly what is a sign? To answer that, we turn to semiotics, a field in which linguistics has many roots. Specifically, this man, Ferdinand de Saussure, 1857 or 1913, who we would now know as a linguist. His book, Course in General Linguistics, was based on student notes of lectures that he gave at the University of Geneva between 1906 and 1911, in which he said, "Some people regard language, when reduced to its elements, as a naming process only, a list of words each corresponding to the thing it names. Thus, we can say that the word house refers to the concept of house. The word tree refers to the concept of tree, etc." This pairing of concept and sound image is what, in Saussurean terms, became known as the signified and signifier. In other words, signifiers refer to concepts, that which are signified, and that is what a sign is, a pairing of a signifier with what's being signified. From this logic, Saussure gives us two principles. Principle 1 we could call the principle of arbitrariness, that the signifiers are always essentially arbitrary. Thus, the word house corresponds to the concept of house in English, but in French, that same concept is represented by the signifier maison. In Spanish, it's represented by casa. In Japanese, it's represented by uchi or ue. In Russian, dom. In German, house. Even onomatopoeia, words which are used to approximate real-world sounds, seem to be arbitrary. In English, a rooster goes cock-a-doodle-doo. In Dutch, kukuleku. In French, cocorico. In Japanese, koke koko. Thus, this principle 1, principle of arbitrariness, seems to always hold true. Saussure also gave us principle 2, concerning the linear nature of the signifier. Saussure says that signifiers are auditory and unfolded solely in time, and he contrasts these with visual signifiers, such as nautical signals. Sign languages also rely on time in very much the same way. Saussure's principle 2 still holds up even for non-auditory signifiers, provided they are linguistic in nature. The linear property of the signifier is something which is true of all linguistic signifiers. In the same volume, Saussure begins to speak about philology, a study of written texts, literary history, customs, institutions, etc., examining texts of differing periods for similarities and differences, determining written peculiarities of differing authors, deciphering inscriptions of obscure languages. This study essentially neglected living language for written language only. Saussure mentions a comparative philologist by the name of Franz Bopp, who in 1816 wrote a book, Über das Konjugationssystem der Sanskrit-Sprache, or On the Conjugation System of the Sanskrit Language, which compared Sanskrit, German, Greek, and Latin texts. Perhaps more well known for this sort of thing is the English Orientalist Sir William Jones, who lived from 1746 to 1794. According to Saussure, however, Jones did not understand the significance of what he was comparing, and Bopp apparently did. In any event, comparative philology gave us the following interesting correlations. English father corresponds to Latin pater, which in Greek is pater, which in Sanskrit is pita. English 3 corresponds to Latin tres, which in Greek is tres, which in Sanskrit is traya. English 2, Latin duo, Greek duo, Sanskrit devao. English 10, Latin decen, Greek deca, Sanskrit Tassa. Using this same comparative method, Jakob Grimm, a German folklorist and member of the Brothers Grimm, was able to note some other correlations between Latin and English. Latin portare, English faire, P to F. Latin tres, English 3, T to TH. Latin cor, English heart, C to H. Latin labium, English lip, B to P. Latin pedis, English foot, D to T. Lo and behold, there's a systematic correlation between these 5 sets of sounds, between Latin and English. Why is that? Well, it turns out that in order to understand exactly what's happening here, we need a new tool, namely phonetics. We need to get away from the written language and start thinking about the sound. And that is where philology became linguistics.